You're listening to Powerhouse Sessions, a space to slow down, see clearly, and allow what's true to come forward. From discipline to identity, I think that I want to make this clear because I've been talking a lot about discipline over the past month over here on Substack. If you follow me on Powerhouse Authority, my email newsletter, I've been talking a little bit about it there as well. I want to be very clear. It's not that discipline isn't good. Discipline is crucial in our lives, and without discipline, then we lack the structure, the consistency, the cadence that's truly necessary to do any of the things that we set out to do. So I want to make sure that that's incredibly clear. But, and there's a big but here, is there's a point when discipline truly stops working, and it stops working for us. It's not because we've lost it. It's because something underneath all of it, underneath all of that discipline, isn't sitting right. It doesn't feel quite right. So it maybe shows up like you're doing all of the things. You are showing up. You are following through. You are doing everything that you think that you're supposed to be doing. And yet something is just a little bit off. It feels a little bit heavier than it should. That is what we're talking about today. And in those moments is kind of when we start to think that we actually need more discipline. So we start to lean into creating systems, to creating structure, to developing ways to be more consistent in our efforts. That usually leads us to what? More productivity apps, right? Asking AI, how can I help to structure my life, to organize it better? How do I structure my calendar, do time management, all of the various things. And I know I've done this myself in my career. This was what I leaned into. And if there's any high achievers who are listening to this, I'm with you. I'm assuming there's probably quite a few. You double down because that's what starts to make sense. That's what's probably kept you going in your career. If anything, it's probably what's made you successful. And when we can start to structure and lean into that discipline, that starts to become our default. That's our go-to response. And I know that it was for me, especially in my corporate career, when I started to climb up that ladder higher and higher, I needed more systems and more structure. And then when I started to build my business, it was the same thing. Here's the sticky part. Here's the challenge that I don't really see a lot of people listening to. Because at some point, we stop building from ourselves. And we start building from a place that we think works. And sometimes what we think actually works isn't coming from within us. It's not coming from us at all. And in these moments is where we start to question things. How many of you have ever been told how to do something? How to show up, how to maybe become more visible, how to be a better leader, how to communicate, how to whatever, right? And oftentimes that advice is very good advice and it works. It works for a time. And that starts to become the way that you operate on default. And because it's working, you don't question it. You don't question everything that's supposed to be working. And so what you start to do is you start to outsource your thinking. Everything looks right, but it doesn't feel like yours anymore. This is a problem, right? This is this kind of tricky part that we start to experience. I think of it like a slippery slope of growth. Be it in your career, in your business, maybe you're developing your thought leadership at this time. And this is the piece that's probably most important that we to start recognizing for ourselves, is because we start to think or feel this greater sense of disconnect from the work, right? And you start to feel like you're losing a piece of yourself. Maybe you start to become unsure even of what it is that you were building in the first place. What is your goal? What is your priority? And you lose sight of everything that it is that you're doing. And so you start to, not only work harder, but you start to feel further away from your work than you did when you started. This is usually the time when all these questions start to come to play. Not only are we questioning our work, we begin to question our value. We start to question whether what it is that we're doing is right, if it's worthy, if we're good enough. This is maybe the time where you might even start to double down on adding more credentials, adding more authority, so to speak, adding more visibility. And you think that by doing these things, it's going to help boost you in some way. Because again, if it's something wrong with you, then you need to add more of something else because we're questioning what's wrong with us. And when we start to outsource our thinking, we start to look to others for the answers. I see this often. I see this in coaches. I see this in advisors. I see this in founders. I see this in leaders. Not only do we look for the answers from someone else, we start to adopt their own frameworks, their own ways of thinking and operating, and the ways and the systems that they go about building that which you think you want. And it can start to even muddy what we think we want. I don't know if you've ever followed somebody that maybe you highly respected, looked up to, felt was where you wanted to be. And so you started modeling their behavior, started modeling the things that they were doing. And there is a degree of truth in that. But the question shouldn't be, what should I be doing? And asking that from others, because that's where we get stuck in that loop. That's where we go through this cycle and we're looking outside to what is truly an internal problem. And why are we doing that? We're stuck in panic. We're stuck in fear. We feel confused. Maybe we're a little bit fuzzy in our thinking. And our mind is telling us that other people must have the answer. And in effect, what we do is we break trust with ourselves. When we break trust with ourselves is when we start to lose our sense of purpose, our sense of clarity around what it is that we set out to do in the first place. The question then needs to become, what is my real priority? And I say one priority, not multiple priorities. I want that to be very clear. Because up until the 1900s, priority was a singular word. And then during the Industrial Revolution, it became plural. Maybe you've read Essentialism by Greg McKeown. He talks about that in his book. Why? Time management experts started to use this word in plural to help other people in industry manage multiple priorities, manage multiple quote unquote first things simultaneously. What that does is then creates competing goals. So the question needs to become, what is the one thing that everything I'm doing is supposed to support? If everything that you're doing isn't supporting your one goal, then you have to wonder, is it Is it of service? Is it of value? Is it adding to your life? Or is it just adding more to your plate? And then we have to become discerning around that. We have to be almost ruthless around boundaries, around what it is that we want to create, around everything that we're doing, our time, our energy, and how we use it. Most people build their lives around their work. Who here ever worked in corporate? Who here has ever worked? I'm going to guarantee that I think you probably know a thing or two about that. If you're building a body of work that has a specific goal, then this is where we start to optimize the very thing that was supposed to serve us. The work is supposed to serve us. We are not to be enslaved to the work. So instead of building our work in alignment with our lives, we start doing the opposite. This is where first principles thinking can really be helpful when you're looking to build a brand, put yourself out there, gain greater visibility or authority. If you're familiar with first principles thinking, then you can understand why this one might be crucial in terms of how you start thinking about how you're designing your life, how you're planning for it, how you're building around it, going back to your number one priority, what that number one goal is. Because the whole point of having a body of work, your goals, your priorities, is often directly linked to the way that we want to lead our lives. I know for me that this was a really big turning point. This was a big revelation. Because when I had walked out of my corporate role, I had a very specific goal in mind. And when I started to run my business, I started to find that my goal was being compromised with how I was operating, with how I was running my business, because I was outsourcing my thinking to all of these other people. And there's nothing wrong with looking to others to see how they're doing things. But the challenge is when we stop questioning and we start taking on wholesale what we're being taught, what we're being told, essentially shutting down our mind to whatever it is that we're being told how to do. So what happened was my number one priority became different. And it became different than what I truly wanted because they were competing. I didn't know how to operate differently. I was confused. And mostly I was confused because I didn't know how to look at it from a different perspective. And my values were becoming compromised. This overshadowed my goal. This overshadowed the way that I wanted to run my business. And I think it's really important that we think about this, because if we're not considering how we're operating, then we have to wonder, how do we know it's taking us where we want to go? Our desire dictates our destination. What you desire, what you truly want, is going to determine where you end up. So if what you're operating from is shaping where you're ending up, you may not even realize that what you're doing inadvertently is sabotaging your goals. And what happened for me is I left corporate. I had a very successful career, but I left corporate because I wanted to spend more time with my son. I began homeschooling my son during COVID. I wanted to continue doing that. And the way that my career was growing required me to make a decision. It was either my career or it was my son. To me, it was a no-brainer, right? But what started to happen was as I walked into my business and I was outsourcing some of my thinking and I wasn't really questioning it because they seemed to know more than I did, I started to operate in a way that was opposite than what I truly wanted. Now, I know that the common train of thought is that there's always a season for everything. But if you're outsourcing your thinking and you're not listening to your own truth, then you have to wonder too, how long is this season? And what are you willing to sacrifice in order to gain it? I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't want to sacrifice the time that I had with my son because that wasn't something that I could get back. But I also wasn't going to get back more time. I was only going to keep aging. I'm only going to keep getting older. So I needed to figure out how I could start operating my business in a way that honored my own experience, my own natural strengths, my own convictions, my talents, all of the things that I brought with me into my business from a 15-year corporate career and beyond. And we have to think about what it is, again, that we're truly trying to build. Is it in alignment? Is it operating from our truth? Is it taking into account who you are? And if it's not, then that's where we have to start questioning, how is what I'm doing, how are these efforts contributing and supporting my overall goal? Sometimes when we hear it enough, this is just the way it is. This is just how it has to be done. This is just the way that you grow, gain visibility, build thought leadership, build a brand, become a leader, communicate. You hear it enough times. It conditions your mind to stop questioning. And you start to believe it. And when it doesn't feel right inside of us, then we assume it's us. We assume there's something wrong with us. We don't start to question that maybe we are built differently. And if we take that a step further, we oftentimes don't also acknowledge that how we're built most likely contributed to the success that we already carry. So we have to think about what we're bringing in, how we're honoring that. Yes, how we're taking in information, but how are we applying it to ourselves? And that is the challenge that I see a lot of coaches and leaders and founders and creatives taking on. Because at the end of the day, it really isn't about discipline. It's about what the discipline is built upon. It's about how it's structured, how you are operating. And at that point, you have to determine what is actually yours. Because when we are building from our own truth, we don't have to outsource our own credibility. We don't have to hide behind a million extra credentials. We don't have to build other people's frameworks. We don't have to do things that compromise our values. And what we get to do instead is build a body of work, whether that's a service or a platform, whatever that looks like for you, that truly represents you, who you are, what you stand for, and why you set out to build this in the first place. And that's why I feel like this is such an important topic, because it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. It's easy to get lost in the noise. It's easy for us to stop questioning it when there's so many other experts out there telling us their one way that they've done it, or one way of leadership, or one way of doing anything. And we don't own what we bring. And the more that you can start to see this clearly, the more you start to sense where things might feel a little bit off for you, where you're building from. The challenge is, what do you do with it? I know that was a challenge for me for a while. It's like, what do I do with this? Because I felt like something was wrong with me. instead of honoring and going back to my foundation, to who I am, to what I'm here to do, to what I naturally excel in, to my style of communicating, to my style of showing up, to really connecting with people the way I knew how. And so I think it's important that we start to make those distinctions. And I wanted to figure out a way to help people with that as well. And so I spent the last year really building a body of work around that. It's meant to address exactly that. And it's really not a program. What it is, it's an integrative system. And what it incorporates, it's built on science-backed psychology, ocean psychology, natural strengths, communication styles, leadership styles, and really understanding the value that each individual brings. And because when we understand our value, then we understand where we can operate best from. When we understand all the nuances about what it is that we bring, then we know how to start building from a foundation that's truly ours. Then we understand how to have conviction behind what it is that we're creating. We understand how to express it. We understand how to build it. And that naturally develops the authority in the body of work that we're creating because it's not borrowed. It's not from someone else. It's not based on someone else's methods, frameworks. It's based on yours. And you can then start to build from that. That is truly identity-led work. And most of the people I work with, that's what they're interested in. They already have all of the necessary skills and credentials, excellence. What they need is a way to understand how to articulate it and how to build a body of work that they can own. That's where your natural intellectual property comes into play because you're building from a foundation that's yours, that you built, and you go from there. So that's what I started to build that. I felt like it was important, and I wanted to create something that didn't give the answer, but told you how to integrate for yourself. Gave you insights in how to ask questions that would truly help to guide you in what it is that you're trying to build and create, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in a business, whether it's how you start to create authority within your industry. So I call it Origins OS. It starts with an assessment and then it builds from there. So if that's of interest, you can check it out. You can go to originsos.app and you can think about what that might mean for you. But the truth is, and I think this is the piece that a lot of us forget, the value you bring, it can't be replicated. The insights, the clarity, the expertise, that which you have uniquely pieced together for yourself, that's yours. And only you are the person who can decide what that should look like and how it supports the life that you are wanting to build for yourself. Because at the end of the day, if we're building a body of work around your life, most likely you're going to end up in the destination that you want it to be, not the other way around. And society teaches us to build our lives around our work instead of our work around our main goals. And our main goals are designed to support how we want to lead our lives. So when you're asking yourself, is this in conflict? Is this in alignment? Does this support truly the person that I am and what it is that I want to build and what I'm here to do? Does it support your values? Do you have conviction behind it? If you notice incongruencies, don't ignore it. Pay attention. Ask the questions. What is your real priority? And is the work and the way that you're operating, is it there to support what it is that you're creating? If you have questions or this is interesting to you, again, you can go check out originsos.app. You can see about the assessment that you can take. Or if you want to reach out directly, you can find me here on Substack. That's probably the easiest way. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to chat with you as well. But the main point of this conversation is to truly understand, are you building from what's true for you? Are you building from alignment? Because if you're not, I don't want to see you spinning like so many people are right now, and instead leading forward with the clarity and the conviction that truly develops the authority for the body of work that you are building. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today. I truly appreciate you again taking the time out of your day to be here. I don't take that lightly. I'm so appreciative and honored. And again, I'd love to speak with you. So if you have questions, please reach out. All right. Thanks so much. If something in this stayed with you, that's usually where the work begins.